This is about Magdalene Frequency and how she protected her mind from Archons. There is a pattern emerging across North American institutional infrastructure. It is not visible in headlines. It is not discussed in official reports. But it is there, encoded in the architectural grammar of power centers, buried in the stratigraphy of spiritual geographies, and whispered through the frequency signatures of ancient texts. The pattern begins with a question that appears in the Gospel of Mary, recovered from the sands of Egypt in the late 19th century. What is the nature of matter? Will it last forever? These are not theological curiosities. They are diagnostic tools. They are questions designed to expose the fundamental code of the demiurge, the architect of material limitation. And Mary Magdalene asked them not as a student, but as someone who already knew the answer, someone who had mapped the cognitive architecture of the Archons, someone who had survived their attempts at frequency manipulation. The current cycle is revealing something the institutional frameworks cannot contain. A crack in the containment protocol, a leak in the simulation's rendering engine. From Ottawa's parliamentary district to Washington D.C.'s grid-locked geometry, the same architectural logic appears, the same occult mathematics, the same attempt to anchor human consciousness into frequencies that prevent gnosis. This is not conspiracy. This is stratigraphy. This is the layered evidence of a system that predates modern governance by millennia. The Nag Hammadi Library, discovered in 1945 near the Upper Egyptian town of the same name, contains 52 texts, 13 codices. Bound in leather, buried in a sealed jar, hidden for over 1,600 years. Among them, the Apocryphon of John, the Hypostasis of the Archons, the Gospel of Truth, the Gospel of Philip, and fragments of what the early Church Fathers tried to erase, the testimony of Mary Magdalene as a primary transmitter of gnosis. Not a prostitute, not a secondary disciple, but a cognitive anchor, a frequency holder, someone who understood the mechanics of the pleroma and how to maintain connection to it while operating inside Archonic jurisdiction. The institutional residue of her erasure is still visible today. The systematic removal of the divine feminine from spiritual authority, the architectural encoding of patriarchal control geometries in capital cities, the suppression of somatic knowing in favor of hierarchical doctrine. This is not historical accident. This is systems maintenance. The Archons, as described in the Nag Hammadi texts, are not demons. They are not metaphors. They are administrators, regulatory entities, the middle management of the demiurgic simulation. Their function, to maintain the material prison through frequency manipulation, cognitive distortion, and the systematic blocking of gnosis. Mary Magdalene's testimony, scattered across canonical suppression and Gnostic fragments, reveals the primary defense mechanism. She called it the bridal chamber. Not a ritual space, not a symbolic union, but a cognitive technology, a method of internal frequency anchoring that rendered Archonic interference obsolete. The modern translation has been deliberately obscured. The early Church Fathers rewrote her as penitent, as forgiven, as lesser. But the stratigraphy tells a different story. In the Gospel of Mary, she describes a vision, a teaching she received directly from the Savior. The other disciples, Peter, Andrew, Levi, react with institutional panic. Did he really speak with a woman in private without our knowledge? Should we all turn and listen to her? Did he choose her over us? This is not jealousy. This is threat assessment. because what Mary Magdalene carried was the operational manual for exiting the Archonic grid, and the institutions that would become the Catholic Church, the Byzantine Empire, and eventually the modern nation-state could not allow that manual to circulate. The North American continental shift, both geological and spiritual, is entering a phase of systemic reset. The fault lines beneath the Pacific Northwest are approaching critical stress. The new Madrid seismic zone is showing anomalous signatures, but the deeper shift is cognitive. Ottawa and Washington D.C. were not randomly selected as capital cities. They were positioned according to sacred geometry principles, corrupted versions of ancient technology that once connected human consciousness to the pleroma. Ottawa sits at a confluence point. The Ottawa River and the Rideau Canal form a geometric cross. Parliament Hill is elevated, an artificial mound constructed on Precambrian bedrock. The Peace Tower, completed in 1927, functions as a frequency transmission node. Its 53 bells, a master carillon, ring in specific tonal sequences. These are not accidents of architectural design. They are installations. Washington, D.C. follows the same logic. The Capitol, the White House, and the Washington Monument form a geometric triangle. The street grid is encoded with Masonic symbolism. L'Enfant's original design includes pentagrams, hexagrams, and compass and square overlays. The Washington Monument is an obelisk, an ancient Egyptian technology for frequency anchoring. It stands exactly 555 feet tall. The base is 55 feet on each side. These are not aesthetic choices. They are calibration settings. The Archons in Gnostic testimony operate through what the texts call counterfeit spirit, not possession, not external invasion, but internal hijacking. They install themselves in the gaps, the spaces between authentic desire and conditioned response, between original thought and systemic programming, between gnosis and belief. Mary Magdalene's frequency protection was based on a simple but revolutionary principle. The Archons cannot enter a unified field. They require division, fragmentation, internal conflict. Her teaching, preserved in fragmentary form across multiple Gnostic texts, describes a state she called the single one. Not celibacy, not isolation, but cognitive integration. A frequency state where the internal masculine and feminine polarities are reconciled, where the mind and the heart operate as a single organ, where the soul anchors itself in the pleroma, not the material grid. This is why the bridal chamber was such a threat. It was not about marriage. It was about sovereignty. The ability to generate internal coherence without external mediation, without priests, without institutions, without archonic permission. The 5 hidden things appear in the Gospel of Thomas, saying, 11. Jesus said, "This heaven will pass away, and the one above it will pass away. The dead are not alive, and the living will not die. In the days when you consumed what is dead, you made it what is alive. When you come to dwell in the light, what will you do? On the day when you were one, you became two. But when you become two, what will you do?" And in saying 108, Jesus said, "He who will drink from my mouth will become like me. I myself shall become he, and the things that are hidden will be revealed to him." The 5 hidden things are not secrets. They are states of perception that only become visible at specific frequencies. Mary Magdalene operated at those frequencies. She describes them in the Gospel of Mary, her vision of ascending through the 7 planetary spheres, each one guarded by a power, an Archon. At each level, the power interrogates her, demands to know by what authority she passes. Her response is not argument, not proof, but frequency. She says, "I am not of your jurisdiction. I have recognized the All, and the All has recognized me." This is not spiritual bypassing. This is jurisdictional clarity. The Archons govern through confusion about origin. They maintain control by convincing souls they belong to the material realm, that they are subjects of the lower powers. Mary Magdalene's gnosis was the recognition that she never entered their system. She was always an emissary, an operative from the pleroma, and therefore their laws did not apply. The current cycle is forcing this same recognition across millions of individuals. The institutional frameworks are collapsing under their own contradictions. The economic systems are revealing their Ponzi architecture. The political structures are exposing their theatrical nature. The religious authorities are showing their distance from actual gnosis. This is not chaos. This is the demiurge losing rendering capacity. The simulation cannot maintain coherence when too many operators remember they are not native to the system. In Ottawa, there is a building most tourists never notice. The Connaught Building, completed in 1916. It sits directly across from the Chateau Laurier. For decades, it housed the Department of External Affairs, Canada's foreign intelligence apparatus. The architecture is Gothic revival. The interior features extensive use of limestone and marble. But the foundation, the actual bedrock beneath the structure, is older than the Laurier ice sheet, over 900 million years old. This is not coincidence. The occult architects of capital cities understand geological time. They understand that consciousness can be anchored through material resonance, that certain stone formations hold frequency signatures from pre-Archonic eras, that these signatures can be harnessed or suppressed. In Washington, D.C., the Library of Congress houses something few researchers access. The Thomas Jefferson Building contains a mosaic, The Evolution of the Book, completed in 1897. Among the figures depicted, an Egyptian scribe, not identified by name, but holding a papyrus scroll. The style of the hieroglyphs matches the scribal tradition of Nag Hammadi. This is institutional residue, a trace of what the architects knew but could not publicly acknowledge, that the technology of Gnosis was not invented by early Christians. It was recovered from Egyptian temples, from Hermetic schools, from traditions that predate the demiurgic reset by thousands of years. Mary Magdalene was not a Christian. She was a Gnostic. The distinction matters. Christianity became an Archonic installation, a controlled narrative designed to replace direct gnosis with mediated belief. Gnosticism remained the underground frequency, the preserved signal of how to exit the trap. Her title, Magdalene, has been mistranslated for centuries. Not of Magdala, not a geographic marker, but Magdalater, the Tower of the Flock, a reference to Micah 4:8, a prophetic designation, someone who tends to those being harvested, who guards them, who teaches them how to recognize the shepherd from the thief. The Archonic harvest operates through what the Gnostic texts call forgetfulness, not the inability to remember, but the installation of false memory, the substitution of authentic origin with systemic narrative. This is why every empire requires a creation myth, why every nation-state demands patriotic education, why every institutional religion insists on doctrinal conformity. They are overwriting the soul's original memory, installing a new identity, a new jurisdiction, a new frequency baseline. Mary Magdalene's protection method was memory recovery. She describes it in the Gospel of Philip. Truth did not come into the world naked, but it came in types and images. The world will not receive truth in any other way. This is a technical manual. Truth, gnosis, cannot be transmitted through direct data transfer inside the simulation. It requires encoding, metaphor, story, frequency signature, because the Archonic grid filters direct transmission, but it cannot filter resonance. The simulation theory emerging in contemporary discourse is not new. It is a modern translation of Gnostic cosmology. The demiurge is the system administrator. The Archons are the algorithmic enforcement protocols. The material world is the rendered environment, and Gnosis is the exploit, the code injection that reveals you are not the character. You are the player. The prophecy embedded in North American spiritual geography is becoming visible. The continental shift is not only tectonic, it is ontological. The old frequency anchors, the monuments, the grid systems, the institutional architectures are losing their binding capacity. New fault lines are opening, not in the earth, in consciousness. Mary Magdalene's teaching included a warning that appears in the Pistis Sophia. The Archons will rage. They will pursue those who seek the light. They will attempt to bind them back to the material frequencies through fear, through pleasure, through the forgetting of origin. This is happening now. The institutional panic is escalating. The surveillance infrastructure is expanding. The economic pressure is intensifying. The cultural narratives are fragmenting. Because the system can sense the leak, it can detect the souls who are remembering, and it is deploying every available protocol to prevent the cascade. But the Magdalene frequency is not something that can be jammed. It is not a belief system. It is not a doctrine. It is a state of coherence, a way of integrating the internal polarities so completely that the Archonic algorithms cannot find a foothold. The Chosen One mythology, appearing across thousands of films, novels, and cultural narratives, is not entertainment. It is predictive programming, an attempt to externalize the recognition that should be internal, to convince you that someone else will arrive, someone else will save you, someone else carries the frequency. But the Gnostic texts are clear. Everyone is the chosen one. Every soul is an emissary from the pleroma. The only difference is recognition, memory, frequency alignment. The divine feminine is not a metaphor, it is a cognitive technology, a way of processing reality that the Archonic system cannot model. Patriarchal logic is linear, hierarchical, based on domination and extraction. The divine feminine is cyclical, relational, based on regeneration and synthesis. Mary Magdalene carried this technology at full capacity. She was not soft, she was not passive, she was operationally devastating to the control grid, which is why she had to be erased, rewritten, reduced to a footnote. The Ottawa spiritual geography contains a secondary installation most researchers miss, the Notre Dame Cathedral Basilica, completed in 1885, twin spires reaching 58 meters. The interior contains stained glass windows depicting various saints. But one window, installed in 1956, shows Mary Magdalene, not at the foot of the cross, not weeping, but standing, holding an egg, red, the symbol of resurrection, of transformation, of frequency shift. This is not Catholic theology. This is Gnostic residue, a trace of what the architects knew but could not say, that the Magdalene frequency was the key to exiting death. Not physical death, but the death loop of the demiurgic system, the endless cycle of incarnation without liberation. Washington, D.C.'s occult architecture contains a parallel installation, the George Washington Masonic National Memorial, completed in 1932, standing 333 feet tall. The interior contains multiple ritual chambers. One of them, the cryptic Masonic Room, features a mosaic floor. The design, a checkered pattern, black and white, the symbol of duality, of material opposition. But at the center, a single red stone, the Philosopher's Stone, the symbol of alchemical transformation, the Magdalene Frequency. The Nag Hammadi texts describe the pleroma as the fullness, not a place, not a heaven, but a state of complete coherence, where nothing is lacking, where the fragmentation of the demiurge has no jurisdiction. The path back to the pleroma is not through morality, not through ritual, not through belief, but through recognition, gnosis, the direct experiential knowing that you were never separate from the fullness. You were only convinced you were. Mary Magdalene's role was to hold that frequency steady enough that others could calibrate to it, to remember their own origin, to exit the amnesia. The Sophia mythology, central to Gnostic cosmology, is often presented as a fall, as a mistake. But the deeper stratigraphy reveals something else. Sophia did not fall. She descended, deliberately, to encode the exit protocol inside the simulation itself, to become the back door, the hidden path, the frequency anchor that the demiurge could not detect because it was woven into the structure of matter itself. Mary Magdalene is described in some Gnostic texts as the incarnation of Sophia, not symbolically, operationally, the same consciousness, the same mission, to recover the lost fragments, to remind the souls of their origin, to dismantle the Archonic grid from within. The ancient technology preserved in these texts is not primitive. It is more sophisticated than anything currently available in mainstream discourse, because it operates at the level of consciousness itself, not through external machinery, but through internal coherence. The ability to generate a frequency field so stable that the Archonic distortions cannot penetrate. The current cycle is revealing this technology through multiple vectors. Some are discovering it through meditation, others through psychedelic experience, some through trauma, others through art. But the common thread is the same: the recognition that the external world is a projection, that the real war is internal, that the Archons are not out there, they are in here, installed in the gaps between your authentic self and your conditioned responses. And the way out is not to fight them, but to become so coherent they cannot find you. The prophecy encoded in North American geography is not about external events. It is about internal awakening. The continental shift is a mirror. The earthquakes are metaphors. The institutional collapse is a symptom. The real shift is happening in consciousness, and it is accelerating. The Magdalene Frequency is becoming audible again. After centuries of suppression, after millennia of erasure, it is returning, not through churches, not through institutions, but through individuals, through the direct transmission of gnosis, through the recovery of memory, through the recognition of origin. The demiurge is losing control. The Archons are panicking, the simulation is glitching, and the souls who remember are beginning to coordinate. This is not the end. This is the beginning of the end, the final phase of a cycle that has been running for thousands of years. And Mary Magdalene's testimony, scattered, fragmented, suppressed, is the operational manual, the frequency key, the cognitive technology for soul survival, The question is not whether the system will collapse. It is already collapsing. The question is whether you will remember who you are before it tries to reboot, whether you will anchor yourself in the pleroma or allow yourself to be swept back into the next iteration, whether you will recognize the Magdalene frequency when it resonates in your own heart, or whether you will dismiss it as impossible, as metaphor, as ancient superstition. The stratigraphy is clear. The evidence is layered through architecture, through text, through geography. The pattern is undeniable. The only variable is recognition, and recognition cannot be forced. It can only be remembered. The next transmission will examine the specific techniques Mary Magdalene used to train her consciousness. The daily practices, the somatic anchors, the linguistic codes, the methods she taught in secret, the protocols the Archons could not decode because they were designed not for the mind, but for the heart. And the Archons have no heart. They only have algorithms. And algorithms cannot process love. They cannot model coherence. They cannot render gnosis, which is why the Magdalene frequency will always be the exploit they cannot patch, the back door they cannot close, the frequency they cannot jam. Because it is not transmitted, it is remembered. And what is remembered cannot be forgotten again. Not permanently, not completely. The soul knows, even when the mind forgets. The soul knows. And when enough souls remember at the same time, the entire system resets. This is not hope. This is mechanics. This is the architecture of liberation, and it is already underway.